Alright, welcome everyone to the Comics and Cinema Club. My name's Drew.
And I'm Batman. No, alright, it's just me, Matt.
How long have you been Batman? What the fuck? Where did this come from?
Do
I have to go kill your parents now? Are we committing to the bit that much? Am I going to have to go to California and kill your parents?
Why not? It
All
might
right.
as well.
I'll see you guys later. Matt's got you for this.
Well, get back here. Today, I am only doing the bit today because we are talking about two of DC's most recent big hits on this episode, My Adventures with Superman and Batman Cape Crusader, or as I should say, Batman the Cape Crusader on the Dark Knight.
Yeah, we decided to do a twofer because these are just two great projects. My Adventures has been out for a little while, but Cape Crusader came out around the same time as My Adventures was ending. So we decided to do a twofer because these are two projects we really enjoy and really like for a lot of reasons. My Adventures is a little obvious because a lot of people see this as a resurgence and a return to form for Superman. Because, let's be honest here, ever since 2013, Superman has not been Superman. He's been Zack Snyder's or Injustice's little plaything. He's been misused and mistreated and mischaracterized.
The only time that he actually appeared to be Superman was the comics, and that's fine. But everywhere else, he had a real negative impact because he was just dark. He was gritty. He was, well, in Man of Steel, he was aggressive, but he wasn't like broody. You know, it's like more often his story beats followed that of Batman, which makes me wonder why didn't Zack ever just do a Batman movie? But nonetheless, it was dark, it was Batmanish, and it just didn't really feel like Superman. And it didn't help that around the same time we were getting so many evil Superman parodies.
Yeah.
We have, I can list three right now: Omni-Man, Brightburn, and Homelander, who all try to insult Superman and say the idea of him isn't really timely or just doesn't really work for the modern era. But that's wrong, you know. And now we have something that brings more heart, brings more life, brings more of the what we know about Superman to the public light, and it shows, hey, Superman is not boring. He is very much an icon, and there's a very good reason for that.
Yeah, a fun thing I want to mention about Superman is that I really used to actually kind of hate Superman because when I was growing up, I always just thought everyone said, oh, Superman's my favorite because he has all the powers. And I was like, that just kind of makes him boring. So I was always more of a Batman guy because I was like, oh, Batman's cool. Batman doesn't have the powers. He's running around kicking ass. He's being cool. But then I really got into Superman comics and really started reading it. I was like, this is actually Superman as Superman without his powers. And there's a reason why I hate we're not just making this a Man of Steel hate discussion, but I hate Man of Steel because of fucking Jonathan Kent.
Mm-hmm.
I fucking hate that interpretation of Jonathan Kent because, look, Superman is the way he is because he was raised by two loving, caring parents. Because these guys cared about him. He was an alien from another world. They could have just said, nope, we don't want to deal with this. Get the fuck out of here. But they took him in. They looked after him. They cared for him. They raised him. Superman is an alien being human. He's not, let me rephrase that. He is an alien. No, he's a human trying to be an alien. That is Superman in a nutshell. He's been so indoctrinated with the ideals of humanity that he is human. Whereas with Man of Steel, Jonathan Kent is literally just like, I hate the scene. The scene that I'm going to talk about, everyone knows, but there's the scene where, like, Clark just saved these kids from drowning, and Jonathan's talking with him, and Clark's just like, what was he supposed to do? Just let them drown? And Jonathan just goes,
Maybe.
Yeah, probably. Fuck them kids.
Like, I get the idea behind it. Like, he just doesn't want Clark to be found and, like, dissected by the government or whatever, which is a fair concern. But nonetheless, saying maybe to that, that's a very, very damaging moment for the character of Jonathan Kent. And it's a shame because we had a really good one for years on Smallville. He was tough, he was firm, he didn't let Clark do a lot of things because, he didn't want to risk him getting discovered, but he was kind, he was fair, he loving, you felt the love that family had for each other. But in the movie, it just didn't come across because he just seemed so focused on how important Clark is going to be, how he's going to be this big hero, and yet he's also preventing him from being a big hero. And that's often a big problem with the movie. It doesn't know what it wants to be. It doesn't know if it wants to be God becoming man or man becoming God. It's just confused.
Or Jesus. It's a Jesus allegory. At the end of the day, that's all.
I am Jesus.
It's just a Jesus allegory, and it doesn't work. And the thing that I hate too
he's not Jesus. If anything, his story very much follows Moses more than anyone else.
And that's why My Adventures works so fucking well. it was the first real wholesome Superman thing we'd gotten since the early 2000s, since Smallville, I guess, and since a lot of other stuff, and the comics. Because comics also, there was New 52,
Yes.
and then there was Bendis. But then the comics were just starting to make a comeback too, because you had Philip Kennedy Johnson doing Action Comics, which is great. Now you have Joshua Williamson doing Superman, which is also really great. You had the wholesomeness. You had Daniel Warren Johnson doing one of my favorite comics that's related to Superman. So you had him coming back in the comics. You had him sort of coming back in the movies and the TV. And then My Avengers just sold it. Because My Avengers was like, hey, this is Superman. He's going to be wholesome. He's going to be caring. He's going to want to help everybody. He's going to be a goof sometimes too. But he's Superman. And they also did a good job of capturing Luz Nocera. I mean, they did a good job of capturing Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen.
Yeah, that's the thing that everybody was pointing out. Lois is very much Luce from Owl House, which I very much enjoy because Luce is a fun character.
Yeah.
And this whole show is very similar to Owl House in a lot of ways. Like, you could say Clark is very similar to Amity, and Jimmy Olsen is very similar to Gus, which I actually find interesting. It's like, can you imagine if Luz Nocera was in the DC world? She and Amity would love Zatanna.
They would.
But nonetheless, that sort of style works very well for the tone of what they're trying to achieve here, because you have the wholesomeness, you have the heart. Some people say the relationship between Clark and Lois moves really, really fast, which is fair. But at the same time, you have to work with what you got. They only have 10 episodes a season, which sucks because animation used to give us 26 episodes. But that's neither here nor there.
The other thing, too, is that that's kind of how the relationship was in the comics.
Yeah.
It's Clark and Lois. Everyone knows that they're going to hit it off immediately. It's Lois and Clark, you know? They're supposed to be together. And the show does a great job of exploring the relationship and hyping that up. But then also just showcasing Superman and Clark being two separate entities, but also just being the caring person that he is. And it's not like there's one scene that comes to mind. So the whole plot of the first season is that there was this event called 0 Day. And 0 Day was basically aliens came to Earth and attacked, and General Sam Lane was involved in it, and it's haunted him ever since. He's been preparing for it. Clark shows up, an actual alien, and Lane thinks he's here to invade. He's here to kick off another 0 Day. So he confronts him, he's imprisoned him, he's going at him, and he basically is like showing him the footage of 0 Day and is like, you know, this is what your people did. And Clark is legitimately horrified.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that because he's just like breaking down in tears and like, why would they do that? And I love it because someone pointed out that, like, imagine that you spend all that time hyping, like, you see this horrible event happen from the perspective of Sam Lane. You see this happen. You see all this terrible shit happen. You're ready. You're hyping it up. You finally get who you think is responsible. And he's a scared kid who has just as much anger and anguish and confusion as you do. It's that's brilliant.
Yeah, and another scene that I think comes to mind for me was at one point Lois discovered, you know, Clark is Superman. They had this little flirtation romance thing going on for a while, so naturally she's really hurt by this revelation when she discovers it, and she feels like he couldn't trust her enough, which is fair because again she just met him. But the main thing that gets me here is that she was worried that Clark was lying about her feelings for her, but then Clark in turn dove in front of her to save her from a machine gun turret, and not knowing that he wasn't bulletproof.
Yeah.
He actually doesn't know a whole lot about what his powers can and can't do, which we'll get into in a second. But in that moment, when all of his clothes are shedded and Lois asks Clark, "What? How would you know you were bulletproof?" He's like, "I didn't. I didn't. I just knew you weren't." And that in turn made her realize Clark is not a mask for Superman to go around. Superman is a mask for Clark. And that in turn is what makes them the great heroes that they are.
Yeah.
And then they worked out their problems there. And it's done in a way that I very much appreciate, because I think one of the biggest problems for the last animated Superman, which, by the way, did it really need to take so many years to get a new Superman cartoon? Because the last one was the DCAU version.
Really?
Really?
I thought there was another one after that.
I don't think so, because there was that, and then there was the Justice League stuff. But I think one of the biggest problems with that is that Lois, in turn, they don't really. They have chemistry, but they spend a lot of the show apart. Mm-hmm. They're not really that together, you know. Like Lois is known as Superman's girl because he saves her all the time, but they didn't really. I don't know if they became a couple at the end, but it took them a long ass time for them to actually be a couple. So that's something that I appreciate, that it didn't waste a whole lot of time in making them and establishing that they like each other, that they find each other just drop dead gorgeous. Lois is always calling Clark gorgeous, which is I find very cute. And yeah, they just work well together. And not only that, Jimmy Olsen in turn works really well too, because Jimmy Olsen isn't the most popular character in Superman lore. He had a really good run for a long time called Superman's Pal, Jimmy Olsen. That's a really good story. But he in turn isn't the most popular. I think we can all agree there. But here he has a whole lot of charm. He has a great dynamic with Clark, and it showcases how their friendship is really, really important to Clark. And he's always both very supportive, but he can also have his limits. He's frustrated when his friends don't really include him in shit. And that in turn came across very well in the first season. And he has his own little arc with what was his name again?
Steve Lombard.
Steve Lombard. He has his own little mini moment with Steve Lombard, who in turn is a lot of fun in this show. Yeah. Same with Cat Grant and the other one.
Robert, or it's
Ronnie
Trope.
Ronnie, who in turn is gender here. She isn't as memorable as Cat or Steve because they're just sort of the Team Rocket of the show, which I find very funny.
The other great thing too is that there's so many wholesome and sweet moments and great emotional character moments in this too, because in the comics, Steve Lombard's kind of a dick.
Yeah.
He's kind of a jerk, but here they actually gave him development and characterization. And the same can be said for, when you get into second season, Supergirl. Supergirl was really interesting. Matt thought she was going to be Zod. I think a lot of people thought she was going to be Zod for the longest time.
How else am I supposed to interpret a Kryptonian warrior who was alive for Zero Day saying to Brainiac, "In the end, they will kneel"?
Well, Zod might still be coming. We'll see.
That was a tease during Comic-Con, I think, where there's a little tease of the villains. I think one of them is Zod, but I could be wrong.
It might be Zod, or it might be, there's a guy from the Phantom Zone. I forget his name.
Radtastic.
No, what?
No. I thought you were talking about someone else. Sorry.
No, he's from the Phantom Zone. I forget his name, but he's trapped there or something.
Zod. That's typically Zod,
but basically, it's someone else. I think it's Jax or something like that.
Oh, right. Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
So it might be him if they go to the Phantom Zone, but. The biggest thing was just they did a great job with Kara with developing her too. She shows up and she's sort of a fish out of the water like Clark. She and Jimmy pulls her really easily because he's Jimmy Olsen.
She's also designed like Android 18 from Dragon Ball. This show has a real huge anime influence.
It's a fantastic anime influence. The animation's beautiful and there's some really solid animated moments that stand out with the battles and everything and the action and some of the just character beats. But Kara is developed well too because she starts off as this murder machine, but then she doesn't realize she's a murder machine, so it really develops her, and at the end she becomes the hero she's meant to be. And there's just a really great, wholesome little relationship and family sort of aspect, and sibling almost feel with her and Clark, where they very much so behave like siblings or cousins or related, and that's just I love that.
It's very refreshing to see, since Supergirl in the comics didn't always have the best history. Let's be real. At several points, at one point she dated a horse.
I was going to say.
At one point she dated a horse. At other points, Superman said if they weren't cousins, then he would love to marry her, because writers didn't know what to do with her because she was just the female Superman for a while. And then the movie came along, which in turn was terrible, and that in turn got her killed in Crisis on Infinite Earths. And
that's why she got killed?
Yeah, probably. But because Crisis was shortly after the movie, and the movie sucked, so they killed her. And then it was a while, for a really long time, before they brought her back. And then Power Girl happened, which in turn made her the icon she is, not in the best way. But but it took a while for Kara to return, and then we got this, and it's honestly very nice. It's very wholesome. It feels like the writers understand what they wanted to do with her. Yeah. Although I will say I am a bit bitter that she used the kneel thing, because why else?
They wanted
it
was a bait and switch.
It is kneel before Zod, not the Kryptonian Empire.
The other thing too about this show is that they do a great job of exploring Kryptonian lore. And also, showcasing Clark slowly coming into his powers. Because in this, he doesn't... What I like, a little thing that they did at the very start of the show was he doesn't speak Kryptonian. Mm-hmm. Which I always like because, his dad shows up and his dad's speaking Kryptonian. And it's the hologram dad, not John Kent.
Yeah.
By the way, John and Martha Kent in this, they don't really show up much. And they don't have a lot of like character development, but they're still really wholesome and caring. They literally like accept Kara into their family without a second thought. So that speaks to Martha and John Kent. Still better than whatever the fuck Man of Steel was trying to do. But the way that they show it is that like he's still coming to his powers. His powers are still developing, which is really good.
And not only that, they're done in a very unique way because he has a sort of a electricity thing around himself. So it's not like powers are just coming out of nowhere like in the Christopher Reeves thing, because in Superman 2 he literally just grabs his shield and just uses it as a net.
I do want to see that. I would love to see that. No,
I
I would love to see them use that in this show. Like
that would be cool, but nonetheless, it's like it just came out of nowhere.
Well,
There's no kiss that can erase memories, or flying sword.
Not yet.
Flying around the world that in a self-hastic reverse time, because that's not how that works. It has powers, but it also makes him reasonable because he's also vulnerable to electricity. Because as powerful as you are, a ton of lightning is gonna hurt.
Yeah.
And he comes into it. I'm sorry. He comes into himself more, and he develops more of his powers. And I think it culminated very well in season 2, which I find to be the sort of final frontier for his powers. I hope so.
Well, they might still explore him more, but they are definitely doing a lot more with him as a character and with his powers, like Matt was saying, and just fleshing out the world too. They do make it very clear that this is meant to be like an alternate reality, which is nice. It's not meant to be like canon or anything. It's its own world, it's its own universe, which is really refreshing and nice because you can do a lot of unique things. And they do a lot of unique things with the villains. That's another great thing too. Is a lot of the villains and characters. Like, there's a lot of DC characters in this. And I don't think a lot of people know that.
Mm-hmm.
There's literally like these very low level. Like there's like I forget.
Livewire, Heatwave.
Well, no, like the newspaper, the news kids or whatever they're called.
I forget what they're, but I know them.
But yeah, they're like an actual characters from DC, and they're like these kids who are running around and like getting the news and everything, and it's just really cool to see, and it's really fun.
We have Steel who show up, which is very good because it was amazing how one episode was able to get me to love John Henry Irons even more so than a full 2.5 hour movie with Shaq.
I forgot that that's a thing, but yeah, they did a good job with Steel. They did a great job with the other villains as well. They had Mxyzptlk show up. They had Monsieur Mala and the Brain show up, which was not a pair I was expecting.
But and I wasn't expecting how they were going to use them either, because I think I read somewhere they were going to use them, but Mala and Brain, they're not the evil super criminal masterminds that they usually are. They're actually just a kind of a cute couple. They just want to be alone and just be their weird, unique selves without having to deal with Waller or anyone else who wants to control them,
And that's another character. Amanda Waller shows up in this, and that's also really interesting how they do her, because I wasn't expecting. Like I said, Mala and the Brain are not typically Superman villains, and neither is Amanda Waller. They're not like, they cross paths and they collide, but they're not typically supposed to be like going head to head with them. And that's why Livewire and Heatwave, who's also like Heatwave's a Flash villain typically. So it's interesting to see them use them, but they were developed well, and they were done well enough. And same can be said for like sort of the smaller guys. So some of the smaller guys could have been done a little better, I think. Like, that's something that the show does suffer from. It does lean really heavily into a lot of the powers being like technology based. And like the Mist.
Yeah, Mist was there, and then we had
Silver Banshee.
Silver Banshee, and that big guy. I always forget his name.
It wasn't Blockbuster.
No, it was. But he had a simple name. But
they could have done more with them.
There was that, and there was also Parasite, who this time is Ivo, Dr. Ivo, who I would have preferred Tio Maro because his name is funner. But Professor Ivo, in turn, becomes the giant parasite monster, and it's a big kaiju, which, honestly, could you expect this show to end any other way?
No, it did a good job with the kaiju stuff.
It's very much an anime thing. And we also got Atomic Skull. Mm-hmm. We got... who else?
So the big guy,
Deathstroke, of course.
Yes, so Deathstroke's in this. Don't let him near the kids.
No, he's voiced by Jerry too. It's at one point the show airs on Adult Swim, so at 1 hour you could see this actor be a pathetic little loser like Jerry, and then the next you get his dangerous assassin self. Yeah, and that's the thing, is that like it was very weird hearing Jerry's voice come out of him. But there was another character he looked like Blockbuster. He's actually Damage. That's right. Yeah. Simple name.
That's right. But those are those guys, and then they have the starts of Metallo. They have Hank Henshaw who shows up, and when he showed up, I was like, oh, that's not going to be good because Hank Henshaw is a cyborg Superman, and
Yeah.
he's a character.
With all the ones that we have so far, we have Cyborg, we have John Henry, we have we're getting Superboy eventually, as it was revealed in Comic-Con.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
So they're probably
we might genuinely get Doomsday eventually.
Depending on how they do, I might be curious to see how that turns out. I mean, for all we know, they could make Henshaw into Doomsday or into Metallo because they do a lot of like playing around with certain things in this, which is really fun. And they introduced Lex Luthor with this most recent season, which was really cool too.
He was present in season 1, but he was just called Alex, so we didn't know if he was Luthor. But then it was revealed, I'm Lex Luthor, and by the end of the season, he shaves bald. So
and he's building his company and everything. So, and then by far one of my favorite villains in this show is probably the best one in my opinion, Brainiac. They did a really good job with Brainiac. I really like Brainiac in general, not just from this, just in comics and everything. I think he's a really unique villain. He's all about knowledge, but the way they did him here was really unique because first of all, he's fucking menacing as shit.
He's acted like Am from I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, which I find very, very deep and intimidating.
But the whole thing about him is that he's created by Krypton to be like their sort of defense network and to be like an AI that helps them. And the way that they go about it is he destroys Krypton because he's becoming obsolete.
Mm-hmm.
Because without a war, like what is he going to do? How's he going to fight? So he destroys Krypton to sort of keep the Kryptonian Empire alive in his own mind's eye so that he can keep it going. But he's fucking menacing and creepy as shit.
I will say I'm not as big a fan of Brainiac as Drew is. I kind of prefer Ultron when it comes to evil AIs in comics, but this is the one that I like the most. This is one that really convinced me on the whole concept of him because he's not only menacing, he doesn't have a silly green face design that basically just makes him look like every other alien. He has his unique look. He has his unique way he's acted. He's very much intimidating, like you said, and he has such an interesting backstory that you almost feel for him a little bit because he doesn't want to be obsolete. If he tried to work with the new Kryptonian ways, he could have probably had a better life for himself, but instead he just refused to be obsolete, which in turn is what he led to the destruction of Krypton, and I think he used the Phantom Zone for that.
Yeah, I think he did. It's possible he used the Phantom Zone. It's possible the Kryptonian Empire might not be dead. They might just be in the Phantom Zone, but we're gonna have to wait and see. And that's the biggest thing is that second season has ended. We're gonna have to wait a year at least before we get the third season, but it's already in the works. They already got some cool things on the way. One last thing to mention too is there is a comic that is tying it between the first and the second season, I believe. I think that's what it is. It the first? Yeah, it's the first and the second. And then along with that too, I've also got to mention is like in that there is Bloodshot or Bloodsport. Bloodsport shows up, and they have Amazo in this too, who's also being done really uniquely. But then I've also got to mention like the way that they just have random characters because they have Toyman show up, but just as the owner of this toy shop, and he's sort of like Black Ops spy guy. But sort of the point about this is that this show is just unique and it's very well done and it's beautifully animated and there's a lot of heart, a lot of joy, a lot of great emotional beats in it that just work really well.
Also want to give praise to the voice acting because Jack Quaid, who in turn was Huey in The Boys, and what else? He was the guy from Lower Decks Boimler.
Yeah, he's in Lower Decks. He's great in
that. He is Superman here, and he is phenomenal. He brings a whole lot of heart and joy to this role almost, as well as a lot of tragic moments because he is able to pull off his sort of devastation and heartbreak at seeing both what Krypton did and what Brainiac did and what Kara did. It really, you really feel the impact it has, and it comes across on his performance. Not to mention the other actors are all really well
Alice
done.
Lee is Lois Lane.
Alice
and
Lee
she's
is amazing.
Really good as Lois.
Who was Jimmy? I forget.
I can't remember. Like I don't want to butcher his name. It's
Ishmael Said.
Ishmael Said. We think that's how you say it, but he's great too as Jimmy. Michael Emerson's Brainiac. He does a great job. There's a lot of great voice acting and moments in this as well. And the sad thing about this show, Warner Brothers didn't want it.
Yeah.
Originally, this was not on Adult Swim. This was on Toonami. This wasn't supposed to
on Cartoon Network, I think, because it doesn't even really fit on either platform.
Yeah, like I think it was either Warner Brothers or Cartoon Network were like, we don't really want to show it, so we'll push it to Toonami, and then it got onto Adult Swim. But they didn't want it. And that speaks to the other show we're going to talk about, Batman Cape Crusader.
Which they also didn't want.
No.
So that in turn had to go to Amazon Prime.
Yeah. They were just like, we don't really want to make it. Or they just didn't want to. Like, that. This is my problem with Warner Brothers right now, is that they just keep cutting things. Like, we're never going to see Batgirl. We're never going to see Coyote versus Acme. We're never going to see... There was another project they cut recently that's never going to see the light of day. And it's like they're just doing it for fucking tax write-offs, and it's stupid. And I get that they need to save money and that they've been in a slump for a while, because I don't know if a lot of people know this. In 2022, they literally only had enough money to market for 2 movies.
Yeah.
So they marketed for Black Adam and Don't Worry Darling, which were both flops.
Yeah. And so clearly they haven't made the best decisions with money, but we came very, very close to this show never seeing the light of day.
Yeah.
And it's... with My Adventures, it's a shame that it's on Adult Swim, because it honestly doesn't feel like it. It has a few moments that are kind of sexy, I guess, but like for some people, but I don't know. It's more of a kid's show, really. But at the very least, it is one of their most popular projects right now. So Cartoon Network must be really rubbing their neck in embarrassment. So
it was originally supposed to be on Cartoon Network and stream on HBO Max. It's still on Max, but no updates were given until March 2023, and it was announced it's no longer going to be on Cartoon Network, but rather on the nighttime block for Adult Swim. But it was targeted for a young adult audience, so it's weird that they were like, we're going to do it at the midnight mark, and it's like, what?
If I can say, this is very much for like a Clone Wars sort of audience, young teenagers to adults who I still watch cartoons. It's not very much like for kids, which I can understand Cartoon Network not wanting, since they sort of focus on baby shows, But
I will say, what kind of saved this show is that James Gunn saw it and he liked it, so he allowed it to continue without interfering with with his plans, which is really nice too.
And that I can't wait for what he does with Superman.
I'm curious to see too.
But moving on to that, we're on from that. All we'll say is My Adventures of Superman, solid 9 out of 10 show.
Yeah,
which
I like it a lot.
I only talk a point because the pacing is a bit weird, but I don't want to dwell on that for long, because now we go on to Batman Cape Crusader,
which is also a pretty good show. I will say Batman Cape Crusader also has a bit of a pacing issue, I'll say too. Yeah. It does move a little slow in some spots. There's some, I wouldn't say they're filler episodes, but there's some episodes that feel like they don't move the plot along, but it's meant to be more like hearkening to Batman the Animated Series. And here's the thing. A lot of people were trying to compare this to Batman the Animated Series. You can't. Because there's never going to be another Kevin Conroy.
There isn't.
And the thing with Kevin Conroy is that he had such a great voice, and a lot of people were, it was devastating when he passed, and a lot of people never thought he'd get a tribute because of Kill the Justice League. Everyone thought that was a terrible way to send him off. Thankfully, he has gotten a great tribute with Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 3, the animated movie. He had a great final line where he was basically, world's ending, he's confronting the Joker, and he just goes, at least I go out like this, being Batman. And it just fits Kevin so well.
The simple and hard truth is that we will never have an actor who can embody the character as well as Kevin embodied Bruce, because he identified so much of the secret identity thing with his own struggles of being gay and having to hide that from a lot of the people in his life. Some people didn't even know he was gay until he passed away. So that's something that I don't think any actor, past, future, or present, is ever going to emulate. Yeah. But that being said, show still works pretty well on its own, and is still very much recognizable as Batman.
Yeah, I just wanted to get that out of the way because that's.
I think the pacing issues come from the fact that this is nowhere near as serialized as My Adventures, because that's very much one episode builds on the other. Yeah. This is more individualistic bottle episodes.
Yeah, each episode of the week. Yeah, each episode is its own thing, but they do a great job with this show in the sense that Hamish Linklater, or I think that's how you say his name.
Hamish Linklater, I think.
Yeah, he does a great job of being like Batman. Again, it's not Kevin, but nobody's going to be Kevin. But he does a great job of embodying the role of Batman, and then you also just have some great moments. Another reason why some people didn't like the show is because they called this Batman cold and not as caring.
But that's not even really true, because he has several moments where he saves children, and you see him sort of come out of his shell with how he treats Alfred, which is how a lot of people don't like how he calls him Pennyworth instead of just Alfred, as if his man didn't raise you for so many years. But this is part of his character arc in this show. He develops and grows and becomes more open to the idea of people in his life.
I was going to say there's a little something called character development.
It's kind of like a less silly version of the Lego movie, honestly.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like they did a good job because yeah, he calls him Pennyworth, but then at the end of the show, he calls him Alfred, and it
Yeah.
shows development. It shows him changing. It shows him like being more open. And there's a great scene. There's an episode that has Nocturna show up, and she's a kid and she's draining people, but if she gets exposed to daylight, she can die. Where one of the characters, we're gonna get into that soon, but one of the kids who's with Batman is like, you gotta leave her, just let her die, and he's like, I can't do that,
No.
and he wraps her in his cape and he walks away with her, and it's just, it embodies sort of Batman, because everyone always remembers when Kevin, in the Justice League Unlimited, that Ace scene,
Yeah.
it is one of the best interpretations of Batman, is that he's still just a kid, he's still that kid in that alley, and he's gonna care for kids who are like him and who are damaged and who need help, and that's Batman.
As Red from Overly Sarcastic Productions put it, if you can see your Batman comforting a scared child as they're about to die, then you have a good Batman. If not, then you have a Punisher in a weird hat.
Yeah.
So that's how Batman has been for a little while, because I think Ben Affleck very much fit into the latter for the first movie. The second time around, he was a bit more normal, but the simple truth is we really needed a movie for Ben Affleck to sort of see how he became this, because as I said before, they started very much in the Dark Knight Returns era. That is not a good starting point for Batman. That's like an ending point for Batman. But nonetheless, it's this show is not very Dark Knight Returns level of aggressive, but it is very similar to the animated series in terms of tone and aggression, and that's something that I very much appreciate, or the DCAU in general.
Yeah, the other great thing too is that there's a great scene towards the end of the show where Batman picks up a gun and he points it at
Flash.
Thank you. Points it at Flash, and he's pulling, and it cuts away, and you hear the gunshots. And for a minute, I was like, "Wait, are they actually doing this? Is this going to be that different of a Batman?" Cuts back to him, and there's bullets all around Flash, but he's not hit. And then you see Batman knock him out, and he looks at the gun, and there's such disgust and anger on his face that he just chucks it away.
And that's a good character. He recognizes his own struggles and how tempted he was to cross that line. And then once he realized what he was about to do, he was sickened. He was hateful. He was mad. He was very much disappointed in himself because he almost let the image of Batman die. And that's something that just can't happen for this person. So I very much appreciate that.
They also just do a great job of exploring the world. And again, it's like My Adventures in the sense that they make this a very Elseworld style story. You have a fucking female penguin.
Yeah.
They make that clear right off the bat. This is Oswalda Cobblepot. She's kind of a baddie.
She doesn't need to be this dummy thing.
No, she does not. And it's just like they do a good job of really like exploring the world. They have Onomatopoeia as a Batman villain. They have
Gentleman Ghost, who I was very much convinced at first it was going to be some trick with magic or illusions or whatever. No, he's very much an actual Gentleman Ghost, which I appreciate. He's not some trick, and they use that very well because they also bring in Papa Midnight, who in turn has
really surprising.
He has a very incredible voice. I'm just saying, that deep baritone, like nothing. That hits me. But nonetheless, there's a Gentleman Ghost in turn hates the poor. He loves the rich. He is very much racist because he's old. And
we gotta say this. That it's really funny, and I just imagine this like there's a bit where Papa Midnight comes to collect Gentleman Ghost from Batman because he helped him, and Gentleman Ghost just going, "No, don't leave me with this man." And it's meant to imply that he's terrible and he's magic, but I partly thought it was no, don't leave this man, he's black.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't want to be with this guy. Like that speaks to Gentleman Ghost's racism.
Yeah, I just genuinely think he's prejudiced. Like all men are created equal. Like what nonsense. That's how.
Yeah, that was a red flag in of itself.
He's so much fun. He's honestly my favorite villain so far. But
are you saying you like racism, Matt?
Yes, if it means for the purposes of this review and this character, then yes. But
I can cut this out.
Yeah, I'm just kidding. No, another great villain that I very much enjoyed was Clayface, because he is scary, but he also has sort of a tragedy to him too. Because it's not as tragic as the animated series. It's very much he's very much more monstrous than this, but it's kind of like a perfect balance between his best and his worst, which I find very interesting.
Yeah. And what was really interesting, it was much more of a golden age sort of Clayface. He wasn't the giant, like, slurping monster that he was. He literally could just, like, change his appearance, and that was it. But they did a good job of making him into, like, a serial killer, and that he was very much like, I was made to play the villain, so I will be the villain.
Yes. This shows very much like a fusion of the animated series and the original comics.
Yeah.
You might think that would surpass the animated series, but let's face it, nothing can.
No.
But nonetheless, he was really good in there. Catwoman was a lot of fun, played by Christina Ricci.
Yeah.
She wasn't as sympathetic as other versions are, but I don't really mind. She's Catwoman. Let her have fun.
Yeah.
And she's dressed exactly like
Yeah.
her old costume and the one from Brave and the Bold, which I find very much
That's
nice.
the other thing too. This is very much so meant to be like an old style Batman show. It's meant to be set in the 1940s. It's meant to be like, noir sort of thing, and the animation and the style and the costumes, the characters, like Matt was saying, reflect that.
It's almost like these are detective comics.
It really is. They should have called it Detective Comics.
And a villain that I feel like a lot of people are conflicted on, but I really enjoy is Two-Face, because you have Harvey Dent and you build up, oh, he's going to become Two-Face throughout the show, like all best versions do. But he's kind of a dick, He's a jerk. He's full of himself
too.
He's blinded by his own ambition. So what's really compelling is that when he does become Two-Face, he is still sympathetic.
Yeah.
You wouldn't wish this upon anyone, even if he is such a big jerk. But he does struggle with his morals. He works with Rupert Thorne, and he feels hurt by that. And then when Thorne betrays him and double crosses him, he wants revenge.
Yeah.
You understand. And sure, it's not as compelling as the original show or even like the Dark Knight movie, but I still like how he ended very much in a different place than when he began. That's character development right there. He was very much Two-Face, but he was also a good person as he sacrificed himself for Barbara.
Well, he was Two-Face and he was Harvey, and that's how that's when you know you have a good Two-Face.
Exactly. So he may not be the best, but I like him a lot.
And that's Dietrich Bader did a great job as Two-Face too, which is ironic because he was Batman.
He was Batman. He still is in the Harley Quinn show.
And he was fantastic as Two-Face. I actually think because there's a lot of actors who kind of just played one note. He impressed me because he did a really good job with embodying Two-Face and doing different voices and everything. I think someone who didn't really hit the mark as much too was Firebug or Firefly or whatever the
Firebug, yeah.
But I think that what stood out for me in that episode was that again it showed Batman being caring. He runs into a burning building to save it. Something else too about the show that I thought was really cool. It's not necessarily about Batman. Like it's about Batman. Let me make that clear. Batman is the main character. It puts a focus on the cops.
Mm-hmm.
Each episode basically has Batman from the perspective of somebody. The first episode was Barbara Gordon. The second episode is Renee Montoya. The third episode is Flash and Bullock, who are corrupt. The fourth episode is Gordon, slowly starting to realize that Batman is Batman. He is a vigilante, but I have to work with him. And then, replaying it again throughout. So that was really cool to me. That fit with the bottle episode archetype that, like, it was from a cop or a GCPD person's perspective.
And not to mention, they had to deal with Flash and Bullock in their idiotic ways, because Bullock's a fun character. He's a great character in the original show. Here, he's a just kind of corrupt. Same with Flash, but
I wish they did more with Bullock because I like Bullock. Bullock can be fun when done right, and I just felt like they're like he's gonna be corrupt. And I was like, okay,
maybe next season.
Yeah.
Another character who I think is very fascinating is how they used Harley.
Yeah.
Because for one thing, she's not connected to the Joker yet. They actually start off having her be LGBT and into Renee Montoya, which I find very interesting given the show is set in the 40s. But that's neither here nor there. Let's see. What makes Harley so fascinating, though, isn't that she's outrageous or silly or goofy or whatever. She's actually very much well reserved in her persona. She's quiet, demure. She manipulates rich people and breaks their brains, in essence, to try to make them donate their money to whoever else. Or, in essence, she tries to be a decent person, but she's going about it in a very evil way, which I find very, very interesting, very unique, and it's a good expansion. And some people aren't open to it, but it's kind of like with the first Suicide Squad. I admire whenever they take risks and chances with Harley because she's not as well developed. She's very much a recent character.
She needs the Joker in a lot of sense, and that's how a lot of people frame it.
But here she doesn't. So it's a very interesting interpretation. And I, for one, can't wait to see what they do with the Joker because they tease him at the end with a bunch of people being gassed.
Deep ass voice.
He is deep. His voice isn't perfect or perfect. It's very much perfect.
Yeah,
it's a
menacing.
Deep voice.
It ends the show with like failed experiments of people like laughing and dying, like frowns and like imperfect smiles, and then the last guy just has a big old ass smile on his dead face, and the Joker's just like, "Oh, this is great. I'm gonna have a lot of fun."
Time for some fun, Batman.
Yeah, basically. But then they also had a good job with the Robins.
Yeah.
You have like Carrie Kelly. You have Stephanie Brown, which was a surprise. You have Jason and Dick show up in this, which were really fun. They had little cameos, which was cool. And then, yeah, I mean, back on
Uh,
Harley Quinn. Harley Quinn was also done really well too. But in general, this show is just great. It's a good show, despite its flaws. It stands out.
yeah, it's a very much a fun show. I give it 8 out of 10.
I'll give it like an 8 out of 10 too. That's
And,
pretty solid.
and keep in mind, the animated series is a full straight 10 out of 10.
Yeah, you can't top that.
You can't. It's gonna be hard to top it, and we've had multiple attempts, but it's just not working. But I do think Bruce Timm style and very much animated series esque presence is felt in this show.
Yeah.
Because you see all these tall buildings done in Bruce Timm style. You have all these fun characters. In essence, this is a modern day animated series. It's just not hitting the same high notes as the original
No,
did because it doesn't have time.
It does
to,
a good job of
again,
embodying it.
Again, it doesn't have time since it only gets 10 episodes a season, which
Yeah.
is very much unfortunate.
Yeah.
But for what they have, it works out very well, and I very much appreciate it. So
Yeah,
more
exactly.
power to this cast and to this crew.
I'm really excited to see where they go with season 2, and I'm hoping this, like My Adventures, gets more and more seasons in the future. But yeah, I think that's all we got for today, and that's all we really wanted to say about this. But hopefully you guys keep sticking around and listen to more of this, and hopefully we'll have more to talk about with these shows when they get more seasons as well.
Until then, Excelsior, believers. Oh, wait, wrong company.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think we're allowed to say that.
Yes, sorry.
And in the words of Warner Brothers, let's not let these shows get released and just save money and not release movies. I mean, hey, creativity, guys, creativity.
That's all, folks.